What if I told you there's a country that shouldn't even exist? A place where entire cities sit below sea level. Where airports are built on the bottom of ancient lakes. And where, if giant pumps stopped working for just a few days, the ocean would slowly swallow the land again. It sounds like science fiction. But it's real. This is the Netherlands. A nation that has spent more than 1,000 years fighting a relentless war against the sea. And somehow, winning. From massive storm barriers and floating neighborhoods, to deadly floods that changed history forever, the Dutch have turned one of the most dangerous landscapes on Earth into one of the safest and most advanced countries in the world. But now, after centuries of holding the ocean back, they're beginning to do something nobody expected. They're giving land back to the water. So how did the Dutch build an entire country below sea level? And can they continue surviving as oceans keep rising? Let's find out. Imagine a country that should not exist. A place where entire cities sit below sea level. Where airports stand on the bottom of ancient lakes. Where, if the pumps ever stop running, the ocean begins reclaiming the land within days. And yet, nearly 18 million people live there safely. Its cities thrive. Its farms feed millions. And somehow, this impossible nation became one of the richest countries on Earth. This is the Netherlands. A country that has spent over 1,000 years fighting a war against the sea. And against all odds, it's winning. Today, we're diving into one of the greatest engineering stories in human history. We'll uncover how the Dutch literally built their country by hand, how they survived one of Europe's deadliest floods, why the famous story of the little boy plugging a dam is completely fake, and why, after centuries of battling water, the Dutch are now doing something unthinkable. Giving land back to the sea. There's an old European saying, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. And honestly, that's not far from the truth. The Netherlands literally means, low lands. Much of the country sits at or below sea level. It's a massive river delta where rivers like the Rhine flow into the North Sea. For thousands of years, the area was little more than swampy marshland, wet, unstable, and constantly flooded. The sea regularly swallowed entire sections of land. When the Romans first arrived here, they described the local people as miserable villagers living on tiny hills surrounded by water. But those hills would become the beginning of something extraordinary. Since the people couldn't stop the floods, they adapted. They built artificial mounds of earth called terps, raising their homes above the water one basket of dirt at a time. Entire villages stood on man-made hills. Even today, some of them still survive. But around 1,000 years ago, the Dutch made a bold decision. Instead of hiding from the sea, they would fight it. They began building barriers of earth around larger areas of land. The first dikes were born. And with them came something even more important: cooperation. Because if one section of a dike failed, everyone nearby suffered. Rich or poor, every person depended on the same walls holding back the sea. So communities worked together to maintain the dikes, collect taxes, and organize repairs. These organizations became known as water boards. Remarkably, they still exist today, and they're older than the Dutch government itself. Even now, Dutch citizens vote for officials who manage water systems. That's how serious this battle is. Over centuries, the sea shaped Dutch culture itself. Teamwork wasn't optional. Compromise wasn't political. It was survival. Because when a flood comes, the water doesn't care who wins the argument. Either the dike holds, or it doesn't. But holding back the sea was only half the problem. Rainwater and groundwater still had to be removed from inside the country. And that's where the Netherlands' most famous symbol entered the story. The windmill. Most people think Dutch windmills were built for grinding grain. But many of them actually served a far more important purpose. They pumped water. Massive spinning blades powered giant systems that lifted water out of low-lying land and pushed it into canals leading back to the sea. This created one of the greatest Dutch inventions ever made. The polder. A polder is land reclaimed from water, protected by dikes and kept dry by constant pumping. But there's one terrifying rule. The pumps can never stop. Ever. Because the moment they do, the sea starts taking the land back. Beginning in the 1400s, the Dutch used giant chains of windmills to drain entire lakes. Slowly, water disappeared, and farmland appeared where ships once sailed. One of those lakes eventually became the location of Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, one of Europe's busiest airports today. Even now, you can still see historic Dutch windmills standing at Kinderdijk, one of the country's most iconic landscapes. But modern Netherlands no longer depends on wind alone. Today, thousands of powerful electric pumping stations work 24 hours a day. In many ways, the entire country functions like a giant bathtub that constantly has to drain water. And there's a dangerous catch. As wetlands dry out, the soil shrinks and sinks lower. Which means the better the Dutch become at draining the land, the lower the land drops. And the more protection they need. It's an endless cycle. For centuries, the system worked. Then disaster struck. On the night of February 1, 1953, a massive storm slammed into the North Sea during high tide. Powerful winds pushed enormous walls of water toward the Dutch coast. Old dikes collapsed. Freezing seawater exploded into sleeping villages. Families woke up trapped inside rapidly flooding homes. People climbed onto rooftops in the darkness while entire buildings were ripped apart by the waves. More than 1,800 people died. For the Netherlands, it was a national trauma. But during the chaos, one unbelievable true story unfolded. A major dike protecting densely populated regions had been breached. Water was pouring through the opening. In desperation, local officials convinced a ship captain to do something insane. He steered his barge directly into the gap. The ship became wedged inside the breach, blocking the flood long enough for emergency crews to reinforce the dike. One man and one ship may have saved millions of lives. After the disaster, the Dutch government made a promise. This could never happen again, no matter the cost. That promise led to one of the greatest engineering projects on Earth. The Delta Works, an enormous system of dams, storm barriers, locks, and flood defenses built across the country. Some experts later called it one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. And honestly, it's easy to see why. One structure, the Oosterschelde barrier, stretches nearly 9 kilometers across the sea. Unlike a normal dam, its giant gates stay open most of the time to protect marine life and fishing industries. But when dangerous storms approach, the gates slam shut to block the sea itself. Another masterpiece is the Maaslandkering near Rotterdam. This futuristic storm barrier uses 2 enormous floating gates, each almost as large as the Eiffel Tower lying sideways. Normally they rest beside the water. But when massive storms threaten Rotterdam, computers automatically close the gates across the shipping channel. The Dutch designed some of the strictest flood safety standards on Earth. Certain defenses are built to survive storms expected only once every 10,000 years. Think about that. Human civilization barely had writing 10,000 years ago. But the Dutch weren't done reshaping geography. In the 20th century, they carried out another impossible project. They closed off an entire section of sea called the Zuiderzee using a 32-kilometer dam known as the Afsluitdijk. Over time, saltwater turned into freshwater. Then the Dutch drained huge sections of the seabed itself. That new land became Flevoland, the world's largest artificial island. Today, hundreds of thousands of people live there. And many of the Netherlands' famous tulip fields now grow on land that used to be underwater. But perhaps the strangest part of this story is that the Dutch are now changing their strategy completely. After centuries of fighting water, they've started making peace with it. Climate change is raising sea levels and increasing flood risks. Dutch engineers realized they can't simply build walls forever. So instead, they began giving rivers more room to flood safely. Some reclaimed land has been intentionally flooded again. Cities like Rotterdam now build parks that temporarily become giant water reservoirs during storms. Entire floating neighborhoods already exist. Homes rise and fall with changing water levels. The Dutch are no longer trying to completely defeat water. They're learning to live alongside it. Today, countries around the world ask Dutch engineers for help. From New Orleans, to Venice, to Jakarta, when cities fear rising oceans, they turn to the Netherlands. Because few nations understand water better than the people who built their entire country against it. And if the pumps ever stopped? Within days, low areas would begin flooding again. Within years, huge sections of the country could disappear beneath the sea. In many ways, the Netherlands is like a bicycle. It only survives while the pedals keep turning. And for more than 1,000 years, the Dutch have never stopped pedaling. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. So the next time you see the Netherlands on a map, remember, you're not just looking at a country. You're looking at one of humanity's greatest engineering miracles. A nation built below sea level, protected by thousands of pumps, dams, and barriers, and powered by generations of people who refused to surrender to the ocean. For over 1,000 years, the Dutch have proven that with enough determination, teamwork, and innovation, even the sea can be pushed back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more incredible stories about engineering, history, and the hidden wonders of our world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.